On October 15, 1987, the city of Ouagadougou was rocked by the sound of gunfire. Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's visionary leader, was assassinated in a coup orchestrated by his closest ally, Blaise Compaoré. That day marked the abrupt end of a revolution that dared to challenge neocolonialism, corruption, and inequality. But what if history had taken a different course and Sankara had survived that fateful day? In this episode of African Biographics, we reimagine this alternate reality where Sankara not only survives but continues his mission to reshape Burkina Faso and perhaps the entire African continent. To envision an alternate reality where Thomas Sankara's journey continued, it's essential to first understand who he was and his impact on Burkina Faso. Thomas Sankara was born on December 21, 1949 in Yako, then Upper Volta, now Burkina Faso. He joined the military as a teenager, and during his training in Madagascar and Morocco, he was introduced to Marxist, Leninist and Pan-Africanist ideas. This profoundly influenced his vision for change. By the early 1980s, Sankara had risen to prominence within Burkina Faso's military, earning a reputation for his intelligence, charisma, and dedication to social justice. At just 33 years old, in 1983, he led a coup that brought him to power. Now, as leader of Upper Volta, his mission was clear: to transform the country from one of the world's poorest nations into a self-reliant and dignified country. One of his first symbolic acts as leader was to rename the country from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, meaning the land of the upright people. This was more than just a name change, it was a declaration of independence and pride, signaling a break from the nation's colonial past. In just 4 years, Sankara turned his vision into action, and here are some of the initiatives that he launched. Thomas Sankara was a passionate advocate for gender equality, a rarity in his time and in his region. He appointed women to leadership roles, banned forced marriages, and made educating girls a high priority. Sankara often spoke out against practices like female genital mutilation, thus challenging deep-seated traditions despite the backlash from conservative groups. Under Thomas Sankara's leadership, Burkina Faso made significant strides in public health and education. More than 2 million children were vaccinated against deadly diseases, and schools were built across the country. His literacy campaigns reflected his belief that education was key to empowerment and progress. Also, years before climate change became a global concern, Sankara took bold steps to protect the environment. His government organized large-scale reforestation efforts, planting millions of trees to fight desertification and address ecological challenges still relevant today. Thomas Sankara also emphasized the importance of agriculture for economic independence. By nationalizing land and investing in farming, his administration increased cereal production by 75% in just 3 years. Sankara was also an advocate for self-sufficiency and self-reliance, and in this regard, he rejected foreign aid, arguing that it created dependency, and called on other African nations to collectively refuse to repay colonial debts. As a leader, Sankara was also known for his simplicity and honesty. He cut government salaries, including his own, and sold off state-owned luxury vehicles. Driving a modest Peugeot 205, he lived a humble life and encouraged his ministers to follow suit. At a time when many leaders enriched themselves, Sankara's actions embodied his commitment to the people. Now, let's imagine a different outcome to the events of October 15, 1987. In this scenario, the coup d'etat against Thomas Sankara fails. Sankara narrowly survives the assassination attempt thanks to loyal supporters within the military. Blaise Compaoré and his conspirators are quickly arrested and put on public trial. This public trial serves two purposes. Number 1, it reaffirms Sankara's authority, and number 2, it sends a clear message to his opponents that the revolution is not easily undone. Visibly shaken but resolute, Sankara addresses Burkina Faso. In his speech to the nation, Sankara vows that no forces of corruption or imperialism will silence the aspirations of a self-reliant and independent Burkina Faso. A leader who had a similar real-life experience is Fidel Castro of Cuba. Fidel Castro survived numerous assassination attempts and coups d'etats during his time in power, many of which were backed by powerful external forces such as the United States CIA. Notably, after the failed Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, Fidel Castro used the incident to galvanize unity in Cuba, reaffirm his authority, and also emphasize his country's resistance to imperialism. Now, with his authority solidified, Thomas Sankara doubles down on his vision for Burkina Faso. Given more time, Thomas Sankara's focus on local production and collective farming could have transformed Burkina Faso into a model for sustainable development. His emphasis on empowering communities to grow their own food and manage their own resources might have reduced reliance on foreign aid, in turn setting an example for other African nations. However, implementing self-sufficiency on a national scale would not have been easy. Burkina Faso's limited natural resources and its landlocked geography pose significant challenges. Thomas Sankara might have studied the lessons of Julius Nyerere in Tanzania, whose Ujamaa socialism, which he implemented from the 1960s to about the mid-1980s, sought similar goals of equality and self-reliance. Ujamaa, which aimed to collectivize agriculture and promote shared economic responsibility, ultimately struggled due to mismanagement and resistance from rural communities. Learning from these challenges, Sankara would have needed to balance his ideals with practical solutions to achieve lasting success for Burkina Faso. As we all know, Thomas Sankara was a committed Pan-Africanist who dreamed of a united and independent Africa. He believed that African nations, through solidarity and collective action, could break free from neo-colonial influences and build a future rooted in self-reliance and shared prosperity. However, achieving this vision would not have been easy. History shows us that Pan-African ideals often faced resistance. For example, in Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah championed African unity but encountered significant opposition due to his centralized approach to power and ambitious projects, which eventually led to his overthrow. Similarly, in Guinea, Ahmed Sékou Touré, a strong advocate for independence and unity, faced the same issues. Sékou Touré famously rejected French influence by voting no in the 1958 referendum proposed by French General Charles de Gaulle, which offered limited autonomy within the French community. This bold move by Sékou Touré led Guinea to become the first French colony in Africa to declare full independence, prompting France to withdraw abruptly and dismantle infrastructure in retaliation. Thomas Sankara too might have faced similar challenges. His uncompromising stance against neo-colonial powers and his radical reforms could have left him diplomatically isolated as external and internal forces resisted his vision. While Thomas Sankara's vision and charisma were undeniable, his path to transforming Burkina Faso would have been fraught with challenges, including sanctions and isolation. While a number of African leaders were often annoyed or irritated by Sankara's chidings and criticisms for not being self-reliant, a handful were more openly hostile. For instance, in December 1985, the better-armed government of neighboring Mali provoked a brief border war with Burkina Faso, which some analysts saw as partly motivated by fear that Sankara's popularity among some sectors within Mali could contribute to domestic opposition to that regime. Meanwhile, Togo and its dictator Nassimbe Eyadema, another one of Burkina Faso's neighboring states, actively supported dissident Burkinabe exiles who were hostile to Sankara. This backing included offering a safe haven and resources to individuals and groups seeking to destabilize Sankara's administration. In the scenario whereby Sankara survives the 1987 coup, Burkina Faso would see itself vulnerable to economic sanctions and diplomatic isolation from neighbors and Western powers that viewed Sankara's policies as a threat to their interests. Revolutionary leaders often face resistance not only from external forces but also from within, and Thomas Sankara was no exception. Not all Burkinabes embraced Sankara's radical reforms. His land redistribution policies alienated traditional elites, while his refusal of foreign aid angered influential groups who benefited from the status quo. His uncompromising stance and fiery rhetoric, while inspiring, might have alienated even some of his initial supporters over time. As history shows, with figures like Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah and Libya's Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, revolutionary leaders often face repeated attempts to unseat them. During a dedication ceremony in Kulungugu in Ghana in 1962, Kwame Nkrumah narrowly survived an assassination attempt. Arriving a few minutes late, he avoided being caught in a bomb explosion intended to kill him. Also, before the 1966 coup that toppled him, Nkrumah had also faced another assassination attempt on 2 January 1964. All of this is to show that Sankara's survival of the 1987 coup would have not guaranteed lasting stability. To succeed, he would have needed to address internal dissent and external pressure without losing sight of his vision for a better Burkina Faso. In this alternate reality, where Thomas Sankara survived, a very important question arises. Would he have willingly stepped down from power? Well, Thomas Sankara was a man of principles, and he often spoke about empowering the masses and dismantling oppressive systems. This suggests that, in line with his ideals, he might have considered stepping aside to allow a new leader to carry the revolution forward. If Sankara had chosen a successor, it would likely have been through a revolutionary and participatory process aligned with his ideals. Immediately when he came to power, he established committees for the defense of the revolution, CDRs, to empower citizens and involve them directly in governance. So in this scenario, where he survives the coup and now has to hand over power, he relies on the CDRs to nominate and evaluate candidates who have demonstrated commitment to the revolutionary agenda. However, this centralized approach by Sankara might have limited broader political participation like in a normal democracy, leading to concerns about internal power struggles or resistance from factions within the revolution. In the less optimistic outcome, Thomas Sankara's survival would lead to an extended period of rule where his ideals begin to clash with growing dissent. In this case, revolutionary momentum slows down and Sankara's leadership becomes highly polarizing. Facing coup attempts and political crises, Sankara centralizes power, arguing that his leadership is essential to safeguarding Burkina Faso's sovereignty and progress. The pressures of leadership in a volatile context might have tested Sankara's ideals. And remember, they say, power corrupts. Blaise Compaoré's coup in October 1987 marked the abrupt end of Thomas Sankara's revolutionary government. After seizing power, Compaoré quickly reversed many of Sankara's initiatives, including some of the most progressive reforms of the era. Corruption, which Sankara had worked so hard to eradicate, resurfaced as a defining feature of the new regime. Unlike Sankara, who had been critical of neo-colonial influence, Compaoré was welcomed in Paris and strengthened relationships with Francophone allies like Côte d'Ivoire and Togo. Ultimately, Burkina Faso returned to the status quo that Sankara had fought to change. Let me know in the comment section below if I should make a video on Blaise Compaoré. Also allow me to plug my new channel, The Knowledge Quest, where I'll be doing videos that are similar to those here on African Biographics, but focusing on world history and current affairs. The next video on the channel will be a story about Papa Doc Duvalier, Haiti's voodoo dictator. The link to the channel is in the description box down below and also on the pinned comment. Thank you all for tuning in. This has been Tatenda for African Biographics. Until next time, cheers. Have a good one.